I'll never forget the day I realized something was off. It was like a punch to the gut I didn't see coming. Me and Sarah, we were just kids when we got married. I was 20, she was 19. High school sweethearts who didn't know a thing about the world. We've been together since we were 15, back when life was simple and all I cared about was her smile. I didn't have much. Dropped out of school to work construction 'cause we needed cash. College wasn't an option for me. I was swinging hammers and hauling concrete while she was still chasing her dreams, talking about being a teacher one day. We scraped by with an old junker car her folks gave us and a rented shack that smelled like mildew. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Things were tight, but we made it work. She was in her first year at the community college, bright-eyed and ambitious, while I was busting my back to keep us afloat. Then she started slipping, grades dropped, and she got real stressed. Said she needed extra lessons with some professor to catch up. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd come home late sometimes, talking about how smart this guy was, how he was helping her see things clearer. I'd nod, half listening, 'cause I was dead tired from work. But then she started dressing different, nicer clothes, a little makeup, stuff we couldn't really afford. I asked her about it once, and she just laughed it off. Said she wanted to look professional for her studies. I let it slide. I trusted her. She was my wife, my everything. Exams rolled around, and that's when it got weird. She sat me down one night, all serious, saying this was her big shot, crucial time, she called it. Told me she'd be spending late nights at the teacher's place to prep. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to be the jerk holding her back. Just be patient, she said, kissing my forehead like I was some kid. I grumbled but let her go. That first night, she didn't come home till after midnight. I was pacing, worried sick, but she brushed it off, said she lost track of time. Then it kept happening. She'd leave early, come back late, always with some excuse about study groups for practice tests. I started feeling this knot in my chest, like something wasn't right, but I shoved it down. She was my Sarah. She wouldn't do me wrong. Then came the night that broke me. It was late, real late, past 11, and she wasn't answering her phone. I'd called her 5, 6 times. Nothing. I'm sitting there in our crummy living room, staring at the clock, my blood boiling. Finally, she texts me. Don't worry, it's late. I'm just gonna crash at the teacher's. Go to bed. Crash at the teacher's? What kind of nonsense was that? My head was spinning, anger, confusion, all of it crashing together. I wasn't about to just roll over and sleep like some chump. I grabbed my keys and called up Tommy, an old buddy from school who knew everybody. Took him 10 minutes to dig out who this guy was, Professor Mark Hensley, and where he left. Tommy added something else that made my stomach drop. Yeah, man, he's got a rep. Lives alone. Always got girl students over 4 extra classes. Watch yourself. I was seeing red by then. My wife was staying the night at some sleazy teacher's house? No way I was letting that slide. I jumped in the car and peeled out, tires squealing on the gravel. The whole drive, my hands were shaking on the wheel, my mind racing with what I might find. I didn't know what I was gonna do when I got there. All I knew was I wasn't losing what was mine without a fight. And when I pulled up to his place, a little house on the edge of town, I saw it through the window. Sarah, my Sarah, pressed up against him, their lips locked like I didn't even exist. My world stopped right there. That moment I saw them, Sarah and that teacher locked together in his window. It was like someone lit a match in my chest, and the whole thing went up in flames. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. I wanted to storm in there, bust down the door, and deal with him. I could feel my fist clenching, ready to swing, my whole body screaming to take back what was mine. I'm no weakling. I've hauled steel beams and broken concrete with my hands. He wouldn't have stood a chance. But something stopped me, some shred of sense kicking into the haze of rage. I didn't just want this. I wanted him gone, a ruin for good. I stood there in the dark, breathing heavy, watching them like some ghost outside their little world. She didn't even look guilty, just lost in him, laughing like I was nothing. That's what gutted me most, not just the kiss, but how easy it was for her to toss me aside. We built something, me and her, from nothing. I'd given up everything, education, dreams, all of it, to keep us going, and she was throwing it away for some professor with a chalkboard. My knuckles were white, gripping the phone in my pocket. I pulled it out, hand shaking, and snapped a few pictures through the glass. The flash was off, but the street light gave me enough. Her face, his clear as day. Evidence. Not for some sappy confrontation. I wasn't about to sit her down and talk it out like a fool. This was war now. I drove home that night, the old car rattling like it was as mad as I was. My head was a mess, anger, sure, but underneath it, this raw, jagged hurt I couldn't shake. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, and it lit me up all over again. By morning, I had a plan. I wanted to bury him, his job, his smug little life, all of it. Sarah too, if it came to that. She'd made her choice, and I wasn't gonna let her walk away clean while I ate the dirt. I called Tommy again, told him what I saw. He didn't say much, just, man, it's rough. What you gonna do? I told him I needed more, anything he could find on this Hensley guy. Tommy knew people. He'd dig something up. For the next week, I was a man possessed. Work was a blur, hammering nails, lifting blocks, all on autopilot while my brain churned. Every night, I'd borrow Tommy's truck, park down the street from Hensley's place, and watch. Took more pictures, too, him with other girls, students, coming and going at all hours. It wasn't just Sarah. This guy had a system, preying on girls who needed help, dangling grades over their heads. I caught him one night walking the blonde out, arm around her, smirking like he owned the world. Click. Another shot for the pile. Tommy came through. Two said the guy had a history, complaints brushed under the rug, nothing solid till now. I had solid. I had proofs. Sarah barely came home that week. Said she was cramming for finals, crashing at a friend's. Lies stacked on lies, and I didn't call her out. Not yet. I let her think I was clueless, just the dumb laborer husband she could play. Meanwhile, I was building something bigger than she could imagine. Friday night, I sat in our kitchen, the table covered with printouts, photos, timestamps, everything I'd collected. My hands were steady now, the anger cold and sharp. I wasn't just gonna take him down. I was gonna make sure everyone saw it, everyone who mattered. The university had some big end-of-term celebration coming up, a room full of students and faculty. Perfect stage. I burned the pictures onto a flash drive, every frame, and started figuring out how to get in. This wasn't about saving us anymore. This was about making them pay. By the time that week ended, I wasn't the same guy anymore. The kid who'd married Sarah, who'd promised her forever in that rundown chapel, was gone. What was left was this hard shell, running on fumes and fury. I'd spent every spare hour piecing it together, pictures, timestamps, even a couple grainy videos I'd shot from the truck. Hensley's little game was clear as day now. He'd lure girls in with promises of better grades, extra help, then turn it into something else. Sarah wasn't special to him. She was just the one I'd caught. That burned deeper than anything, knowing I wasn't even losing her to something real, just some dude's power trip. But I had him now, and I wasn't letting go. The university's big celebration was Monday night, a student showcase, they called it. Fancy name for a bunch of kids and teachers clapping for themselves in the auditorium. I knew it was my shot. Tommy hooked me up with a janitor's uniform he'd swiped from a guy he knew. No questions asked. Said it'd get me in without anyone looking twice. I didn't care how I looked in that baggy gray getup. All I cared about was that flash drive in my pocket, loaded with enough dirt to bury Hensley and splash mud all over Sarah. She hadn't come home since the night I saw them. Kept texting me excuses, study groups, late library hours. I didn't reply. Let her think I was too dumb to notice. Monday came, and I was a wreck inside, but I kept it locked down. Pulled up to the campus in the old car, parked a block away, and changed into the uniform in the back seat. My hands were steady, but my gut was churning, half rage, half nerves. I walked in through a side door, head down, blending with the bustle of students hauling projects and professors schmoozing over cheap wine. The auditorium was packed, lights dim, some kid up front droning on about his science poster. I found the AV booth at the back. Unlocked. Sloppy security. Perfect. The guy running it was half asleep, scrolling his phone. I muttered something about a maintenance check, and he barely glanced up. Slipped the flash drive into the system, set it to play on a delay, and got out fast. I didn't stick around for the show, not yet. Ducked into the hall, hard hammering, and waited. Took about 10 minutes before I heard it. Gasps, then murmurs rippling through the crowd. I edged back to the door, peering in. The screen was lit up with my pictures. Hensley and Sarah in his window, and with that blonde on his porch, another girl laughing too close in his kitchen. No sound, just a slideshow of betrayal, looping for everyone to see. The room went dead quiet, then erupted. Students were whispering, pointing. A couple teachers stood up, faces red. Hensley was there, front row, frozen like a deer in headlights. Sarah was next to him, her hands over her mouth, eyes wide. She saw it all crashing down, and I felt this savage rush. No tears, no regrets, just cold satisfaction. People started yelling. Some girl shouted, "That's my friend," and bolted out. A professor stormed the booth, fumbling to shut it off, but the damage was done. I didn't need to hear the rest. I turned and walked out, the chaos fading behind me as I hit the night air. My chest was tight, but I wasn't shaking anymore. I'd hit them where it hurt most: his career, her future. She wanted to be a teacher? Good luck with that now. I drove home, the old car rattling worse than ever, and sat in the dark, staring at the wall. It wasn't over, not for me. I torched their world, but mine was still in pieces, and I wasn't sure what came next. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing off the hook. I'd barely slept, maybe an hour, tops sprawled on the couch, 'cause the bed still smelled like her. My head was pounding, but that fire in my chest hadn't died down. I grabbed the phone and saw missed calls: Tommy, a couple guys from work, even my old man. Word had spread fast. Tommy's voicemail was first. "Dude, you lit the whole campus up last night. People are losing it. Hensley's toast. Call me." I didn't call back. Didn't feel like talking. I just sat there, staring at the blank TV, letting it sink in. I'd done it. I'd crushed him. But it didn't feel like a win. Not yet. Sarah showed up around noon. I heard the car pull in, the familiar sputter of the junker, and my stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to lock the door and leave her out there, but I wasn't gonna hide. I yanked it open before she could knock, and there she was, pale, eyes red, hair a mess. She looked small, fragile, like the girl I'd married, but I wasn't buying it anymore. "What do you want?" I snapped, voice low and rough. She flinched, clutching her bag like a shield. "Can we talk?" she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't move, just stared her down. "Talk? You've been talking plenty to your teacher. What's left to say?" She pushed past me anyway, stepping into the house like she still belonged there. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she started, voice shaking. It got out of hand. I was stressed, he was helping me, and I cut her off, stepping closer, towering over her. "Helping you? I saw you kissing him, Sarah. Don't feed me that garbage." My hands balled into fists, not to hit her. I'd never do that, but 'cause I didn't know what else to do with the anger. She backed up, tears spilling now. "I'm sorry. I messed up, okay? For what you did last night, that was too far. Everyone hates me now. I can't go back there." "Good," I shot back, voice hard as steel. "You made your bed. Lie in it." She stared at me like I'd slapped her, then sank onto the couch, sobbing. I didn't feel bad, not one bit. All I could see was her in that window, laughing while I was breaking. "You think I'd just sit there and take it?" I said, pacing now, the words pouring out. "I gave up everything for us. Uni, a future, all of it. So you could chase your dreams. And you thank me by running off with some dirtbag? Nah, you don't get to cry about it now." She tried to knock again, something about fixing it, but I wasn't hearing it. "Get out," I said, pointing at the door. "Take your stuff and go. I'm done." She begged, actually got on her knees, grabbing my arm, but I shook her off, I set out. I roared, loud enough to rattle the walls. She scrambled up, grabbed a bag from the bedroom, and bolted, the car peeling out a minute later. I stood there, breathing hard, the silence hitting me like a brick. She was gone. Really gone. And I was alone in this dump we'd called home. Word kept trickling in all day. Hensley was finished. Tommy said the university fired him that morning. No hearing, no second chance. Students were talking, parents were furious. The guy's name was Mott. Couldn't teach anywhere now, not with that stink on him. Sarah's name was trash too. Nobody wanted her around, none after those pictures. I'd won, I guess. But sitting there, the house empty, victory tasted sour. I'd taken them down, sure, but what did I have left? A busted marriage, a dead-end job, and a pile of bills. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with this hollow ache I couldn't shake. I wasn't sure what I was fighting for anymore. After Sarah left, the house felt like a tomb, quiet, cold, and full of ghosts. I didn't touch her stuff, just left it scattered where she'd grabbed what she could. A couple shirts on the floor, a hairbrush on the sink. I didn't care enough to clean it up. That first night alone, I cracked a beer and sat on the porch, staring at the street. The anger was still there, simmering, but it wasn't roaring anymore. It was like I'd burned through it all, and now I was just empty. I'd taken Hensley down, made Sarah pay, but I wasn't some hero in a story. I was just a guy, 20 years old, with nothing to show for it but a busted-up life. Tommy swam by the next day, grinning like I'd won a war. "Man, you're a legend," he said, slapping my back. Campus is still buzzing. Hensley's packing his things and slinking out of town. Heard he's got no shot at another job. You nailed him. I nodded, forced a half-smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Yeah, good, I muttered, ticking at the gravel. He didn't get it. Nobody did. Sure, I crushed the guy, but what about me? Sarah was gone, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever really had her in the first place. All those years, thinking we were building something, and it was just smoke. Work kept me going, sorta. I threw myself into it. Long hours, heavy lifting, anything to keep my hands busy and my head off her. The guys on the crew heard whispers about what happened, gave me nods like I was some tough son of a gun. Handled it like a man, one of them said. I shrugged it off. Didn't feel like much of a man, just a kid who'd swung hard and hit something. Nights were rougher. I'd come home to that empty house, the silence screaming at me. Once, I found an old picture of us, prom night, stuck in a drawer. Her smiling, me awkward in a cheap suit. I tore it in half and chucked it in the trash. No point holding on to that junk. A couple weeks later, I ran into one of Sarah's friends at the gas station. It's a girl from her classes. She froze when she saw me, then blurted out, "She's a mess, you know. Living with her mom. Dropped out. Nobody'll talk to her." I just stared at her, pumping gas, not saying a word. "You didn't have to ruin her too," she added, quieter. I capped the tank and looked her dead in the eye. "She ruined us first," I said, voice flat. Climbed in the car and drove off. Didn't feel bad, didn't feel good, just done. She'd picked her pass. I've ticked mine. Time kept moving, slow and heavy. I started fixing up the car, something to do with my hands. My old man came by once, sat me down with a beer, and said, "You're young, kid. This ain't the end. You stood up for yourself, that's what counts." He wasn't wrong, but it didn't fill the hole. I wasn't crying over her, not anymore, but I wasn't whole either. Hensley was gone, hurting skimp state, probably flipping burgers somewhere. Sarah was a shadow now, out of my life, out of my fight. I protected what was mine, my honor, my name, even if it cost me everything else. One night, I was out back, working on the engine. When it hit me, I wasn't stuck. Not forever. I'd lost her, lost us, but I'd kept my spine. I wasn't some chump who'd let it slide. Wiping grease off my hands, I looked up at the sky, dark and wide. Maybe that's what mattered, standing tall when it all went to hell. I didn't know what was next, more work, maybe a new start somewhere. But I knew one thing. I'd never let anyone take what's mine again. Not was out of fight.